Hello there, Middle Earth SBG fans. Welcome to another Army review, and today I'm covering one that was asked for by a viewer in the comment sections of one of my prior videos. So I want to go ahead and take a few minutes to talk about this 4 model army, which I think a lot of people really enjoy this army now, especially since it was a key piece of the Pelennor Fields box set that was released a couple years ago. You definitely saw a huge resurgence because of that, and it got it kind of got its own legendary legion with the release of the Gondor at War supplement, which was the first ever supplement released. And when that was released, it also got a profile that was added that really makes the King of the Dead the big hitter that we always kind of, I wouldn't say big hitter, but really made him more beefier, made him more contending than what he used to be. So since I'm talking about the King of the Dead, let's go ahead and just jump into that. And he is a hero of valor. He is fight 5, strength 4, defense 8, 2 attack, 2 wounds, courage 7, 1 might, 6 will, 3 fate. That 1 might kind of hurts, but like I said, with the release of the Gondor at War supplement, we got a new model that really kind of helped out. And you'll see here in a couple minutes why I say that. This 6 will, he's not a caster, but I can understand why they did that because, you know, the Dead of Dunharrow, they were cursed by Isildur for not coming and helping when called upon, and then no one has tried to call upon them since then has been successful because they will only answer to the heir of Elendil, that being Aragorn, as we know. So I'm assuming that the high will count is for 2 things: the fact that they, you know, were cursed for thousands of years and told everybody else to basically go themselves when called upon, and it keeps him from being tied up and tied down by magic. So while he's not a caster, it prevents him from being tied up by casters, which is a lot more thematic and, in my opinion, accurate to what you should see from him. So moving on, he has armor and a sword for his war gear, and then his 2 actions are strike and march. And I know, again, thinking about it, where it's like, oh, it's only 1 might point, but like I said, when we get to the next profile here, you'll see why he actually has an option to be a little bit better. So he has 5 special rules. The first 2 are not explained, and that's Blades of the Dead and Terror. Terror we don't need any explanation for, but quick summary of Blades of the Dead, and now I'm doing this off of memory, so I'm not saying verbatim, so forgive me if I miss something or if I slightly get something wrong, but the short and pretty of it is, when using Blades of the Dead, you use your strength compared to your opponent's courage, not their defense, to determine what you need to roll to cause a wound. That being said, with that special rule, you cannot do special strikes. So no trying to do piercing strikes with axes or anything like that, which is actually something I got called out upon for one of my battle reports a while ago, which is why I know that now. So that's kind of the short end of it. Definitely go check out the main rule books for the in-depth version. So his 3rd special rule is Drain Soul, and that is any model that suffers a wound from the King of the Dead is automatically slain, regardless of how many wounds they have remaining. And then naturally, heroes can try to prevent wounds with Fate, but if a single wound gets through, then the hero is slain. So really good for taking down those mid-tier heroes like Madrils, Kyrians, Gamlings, Grimbolds that only have, 2 wounds and 1 Fate point. Because if you deal 1 wound, he's got 2 attacks now. Which, a little side note, I'm like 95% sure that in the old edition you only have 1 attack, which made it a lot easier for heroes to negate him killing them outright. But now that he has 2 attacks, he's definitely a very good medium tier hero killer. I don't think I would ever try and take him against a big baddie with 3 attack and 3 wounds, unless that big baddie is like straight out of Might, straight out of Fate. But for those medium tier heroes, which is what a lot of armies, those medium tier heroes are your support heroes, he could go in there and kill them pretty easily if he can get a wound off. So moving on, his 4th special rule is the Dead and the Living, and that is only warriors and riders of the dead may use the King of the Dead standfast or benefit from his heroic actions. So that has been errated, I believe, to also make it so that The next profile, which I'll just cover right here real quick, the Herald of the Dead, I'm just going to say that now, is included in that. Well, sorry. The Herald of the Dead is a hero, so he can benefit from the heroic action, like movements, but I don't know if he can benefit from the standfast. I don't think he does, but I do know that he can benefit from the heroic actions. That was added into an errata. Then the final one for the King of the Dead is Spectral Walk, and that is a model with this special rule may move over water features as if they were open ground. We don't see a lot of water features, but we do see enough where that's not a bad thing to have. So I know I try to put at least one, maybe two boards with some shallow water on them, just to kind of break up the board a little bit. I used to have one with a huge river that ran across the middle of the board, and that got to be kind of annoying, so I kind of dimmed it down so it only uses like on a quarter of the board. But moving on, the next one is the Herald of the Dead, like I said, and he is a hero because he's a hero of fortitude. So this is again where I don't think he's benefiting from the standfast, but he is benefiting from heroic actions that the King of the Dead calls. So he is fight 4, strength 4, defense 7, 2 attack, 2 wound, courage 6, no might, 3 will, and 2 fate. His war gear includes armor, sword, and Pennant of the Dead. So the Pennant of the Dead gives friendly spirit models within 3 inches of the Pennant of the Dead resistant to magic special rule. So that really is great because, like I talked about, it makes sense to have 6 will on the King of the Dead because he is, he's very hardy. He's not going to do things against, his own personal will. So he's got a lot of charisma, so to speak. Now giving it so that the rest of the army also has the ability to resist magic makes them a lot more hardy against, casters and stuff of that nature. The war gear option upgrades for the Herald of the Dead is a shield, which I would highly recommend always putting on because that makes him defense 8. Most good armies are still like strength 3 unless you're talking elite units or dwarfs or Urukai. So defense 8 means that those strength 3 armies are going to be wounding, and I'm looking at the troops specifically. Those strength 3 troops, will be wounding on 6s by 4s. So that's makes them a lot harder to kill. And that's something I'll just say now, like that's something you also want to do with your Warriors of the Dead as well. So special rules for the Herald of the Dead. He has Blades of the Dead as well, Terror, Spectral Walk, so he's moving over that water like it's open ground as well, and then the King's Council. So if the King of the Dead is within 3 inches of one or more Heralds of the Dead at the start of any phase, the King of the Dead can spend one of the Herald's will points to declare heroic actions instead of spending one of his own might points. Heralds of the Dead also benefit from the King of the Dead and King of the Dead's the Dead and the Living special rule. So there you go, that's what it's talking about. I guess it's not an errata, it's just in the Herald of the Dead special rule where they benefit from, I guess they benefit from a standfast too, potentially. But since they're a hero, they're going to have to do their own check. But that gives them the ability to benefit from the heroic actions. So there you go. I errated my own video. And that's because they don't... it's not an errata, it's just in the profile. So that's really where the Herald of the Dead shines, is the fact that he can use his 3 will points to allow the King of the Dead to do heroic strikes, to do that heroic march, movements, all those kind of things that you really need. Combats, even, if you really want to go that way. So if you're taking like a pure Dead of Dunharrow list, which is kind of rare to see, but it is possible, I definitely think you should take multiple Heralds. And the Herald of the Dead is not a named character, so you can take as many as you need. Yeah, I definitely think at least 2, maybe 3, depending on how many points you're playing, and if you're running pure Dead of Dunharrow, or if you're running them in the Legendary Legion that they're most common for, which is the Return of the King Legendary Legion. So those are the 2 heroes. Let's talk about the Warriors real quick. The Warrior of the Dead is Fight 3, Strength 3, Defense 7, 1 attack, 1 wound, Courage 6, and then he comes with armor or sword or an axe. Again, he has the Blades of the Dead and Terror special rules and Spectral Walk. But with Blades of the Dead, it really doesn't matter what your war gear is because you can't do special strikes. So his war gear options are Banner, Shield, and Spear. And again, I think you should definitely pay the points needed to upgrade all your warriors with shields to make them defense 8, so they are hardier and harder to kill. It just is, smart business in my opinion. Even going against like strength 3 knights, that's 5x3s. It's still hard to get 5x3s than it is just get straight up 5. And I'm talking knights with lances. That's why I said knights. So the final profile is the Rider of the Dead, and the Rider is the only mounted model, and that's a fight 3, strength 3, defense 8, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 6. He comes with armor, sword, shield, and spectral steed. So the spectral steed is a spirit model that has a defense of 6, and since it's a spirit model, it has a keyword. It also benefits to resistance to magic from a Herald of the Dead. And then the special rules are the same as the warrior, and that is the Blades of the Dead, Terror, and Spectral Walk. So they're an expensive army to play, point-wise. Cost-wise, like if you're looking to get into it, it's one of the cheaper armies to get into, I think, because a box of warriors, the king with the new heralds, and then go ahead and pay for like 2 or 3 riders, and you've got yourself a pretty good army already built up right there. That'll get you 600 points easily, if not 7. And then just take the time and scour eBay and buy yourself a Aragorn model. Any Aragorn model will do. And play the Return of the King Legendary Legion. I don't see why, if you're going to play Army of the Dead, I really don't see why you wouldn't just go ahead and play the Return of the King Legendary Legion, unless you're playing in like smaller points values, where taking a very expensive Aragorn model compared to the rest of the army, even compared to the King of the Dead, he's expensive, would not be viable. But if you're going to play at like 700 or 800 points, here where we play at 800 is kind of like 700 to 800 is pretty much the norm for our range of play. So I definitely think that at 700, 800, you should definitely just run the Legendary Legion, because that allows you to take Aragorn, and one of the bonuses for that is you can get Andoril for free. So I don't want to dive into the Legendary Legion too deep right now, because this is just supposed to be focusing on Dead of Dunharrow, but I highly suggest playing that army at those points levels. And I think Dead of Dunharrow is a really good starter army. So if you're kind of new to the game, this is a really good starter army for you. You've got a little bit of ability to go in and get some kills, which will give you some confidence boosting because of the fact that you're going to be wounding enemies' courage. So even though strength 3 is kind of weak, most things again are courage 5, so 5 max. There's very few things that are courage 6 or above, which is what you'd be wounding. You'd be wounding courage 6 and above on 6s, and usually those are only heroes and Army of the Dead because they're courage 6. So, but like elves, even elves at courage 5, you'd be wounding them on 5. So you have a good ability to do some damage with the Blades of the Dead special rule, and then, like I said, pay the points, make your guys defense 8, and then you're gonna have some staying power. So you're not going to learn a lot of the intricacies of the game because of the fact that the King of the Dead is your only model with heroic actions. Since the Heralds have no might, therefore they can't call any heroic actions. That's why I didn't even say anything about the heroic actions, because they have none, because they don't have might. But it's a good way to kind of learn and use kind of some support heroes. You can learn maneuvering to keep your heralds nearby in order to allow the King of the Dead to benefit from their will points, but also run them far enough apart where you can, and this is why I said take 2, I'm talking about taking 2, if you're playing pure, at least 2, you run them far enough apart to really maximize that 3-inch resistance to magic ability with the Pennant of the Dead. So, and they're an easy army to play. There's not much to them. You're not trying to think about sitting back or should I move this turn to shoot? Do I try to kite? You don't have to worry about that. It's a very good starter army for just going in there, learning how the mechanics of the game work, getting some kills, feeling good about that, and then having some staying power so you're not just picking your own models off the board. So if you're a new player to the game, I highly suggest trying it out. I know some people don't like the aesthetic But if you're just trying to truly learn how to play the game, I would recommend dropping $100 or so into this army. And again, like, all you need is a box of warriors and the new king and heralds models that came out. I don't even think that's $100. I think it's just shy of it. So with taxes and shipping, maybe you hit 100. And I'm not saying that's not a small investment, because $100 is, you know, for me being a Jeep guy, that's 2 tanks of gas to go off-roading. But actually, it's 3 tanks of gas to go off-roading. But you know, it's not a small. It's a small enough investment into the hobby where you could take some time and play with the models and see if you even like the game before investing hundreds of dollars into a intensive army that requires something like that. Because, like I say, a Moria army, you buy a Balrog, that's, you know, a good chunk of change, but then you got to get stuff to go with them. If you're going monster, you know, mash, then those monsters are not cheap. If you're going with like Goblin Horde, goblins, while you can get a good amount of them in a box set, you're going to need like 4 or 5 if you're going to go goblin spam. So, yeah, I definitely recommend this. Last thing I want to talk about real quick is the army bonus. So the army bonus is the dead do not suffer the living in the past, and that is the King of the Dead gains a Harbinger Evil special rule. Additionally, warbands from this army list that contain 8 or more models do not need a hero to be the captain of the warband. Instead, one of the warrior models within the warband takes on the role of the warband's captain for the purpose of deployment. So that's pretty good too. So that used to be really good before the Dunharrow War Supplement came out, because that meant you could just have warriors leading, and you weren't limited to the 15 models that the King of the Dead could take. So similar to what Goblin Town can do, having their warriors lead troops for their army bonus. And then the Harbinger of the Dead being given to the King of the Dead, Harbinger of Evil, wow, being given to the King of the Dead is really great, because again, if you're wounding on courage, so like I said, heroes are pretty much the only thing outside of the Army of the Dead itself that have courage 6. So if you have Harbinger of Evil and you're, you know, knocking that courage down to 5, that means you're going to be wounding everything on 5s almost. Like, there's very few things in the game that have courage 7, those all being heroes. But when you're looking at just simple troop types, you've got a very good opportunity to potentially be even wounding things on 1s, because like orcs are courage 2. Knocking them down to courage 1, you know, strength 3 is not great, but strength 3 against courage 1, that's a 3 to wound on. So that's really good. So yeah, that's a nice little special rule. And then they have additional rule for the army, and that is a Dead of Dunharrow army list is automatically impossible allies with any force that does not also include Aragorn. So they can ally with Minas Tirith, but you have to take Aragorn. They could ally with Rangers, but you'd have to take Aragorn. They could ally with the Fellowship, but you have to take Aragorn. And who else? What else can Aragorn be taken in? I think that's about it, to be honest. So you can ally them, but like it says, you're an impossible ally if that army doesn't have Aragorn in it. And I'm going to take a quick look at the back. So, yeah, it even shows that Minas Tirith and the Rangers are the only green allies for them, because of the fact that Minas Tirith and the Rangers are the only ones that you can take Aragorn in. I don't know why it doesn't show the Fellowship as green allies, because you can take Aragorn with the Fellowship, but they're convenient allies for that. So just going to point that out. So I kind of, again, I'm kind of eroding my own video. But that is everything, plus a little extra. Hope you guys don't mind the little talk, little tactics, and buying guide. Nice, simple army to play, have some fun with. Let me know what other armies you want to hear about, and I will do my best to get to them. But until next time, take care, enjoy your MESBG hobby, and I'll see you later.